Deep in the dusty archives of Mexico, buried beneath layers of silence and classified documents, lies a story that refuses to die. It's a story whispered by archaeologists, dismissed by academics, and guarded by institutions that insist the world is not ready to hear the truth. It all begins with a series of skulls elongated, distorted, and impossibly shaped. These skulls were discovered in remote deserts, forgotten caves, and ancient burial sites near the borders of vanished civilizations. According to everything we know about human evolution, they simply should not exist. Yet they do. Their very presence forces us to ask a question so unsettling that most scholars avoid it entirely. Were these beings human, or were they something else? For decades, researchers have debated their origin. The mainstream explanation points to artificial cranial deformation, the practice of binding an infant's head to reshape the skull. Others have called them deformities, or even accidents of nature. But every one of these explanations starts to collapse when you look closer. When you're confronted with the precise, symmetrical elongation, the expanded cranial capacity, and the absence of the sagittal suture, the fibrous joint that runs along the top of a normal human skull. These skulls don't look like mistakes. They look like designs. The more you study them, the more they resemble the beings described in ancestral legends, the sky visitors, the luminous entities who descended from the heavens. These beings are said to have taught early tribes astronomy, agriculture, architecture, and mathematics, centuries before such knowledge should have existed. But this isn't just about ancient myths matching strange bones. The real storm began when independent investigators uncovered testimonies that had been hidden for generations. Stories from elders in remote Mexican communities describe encounters with tall, slender figures with elongated heads. They were seen moving silently at night, vanishing into the mountains, and leaving behind strange footprints and circular burn marks in the earth. For a long time, these stories were dismissed as simple folklore. That is, until the skulls began resurfacing. First one, then three, then dozens. Each one was more unusual than the last. Some had orbital cavities far larger than a human's. Others possessed a bone density that seems impossible for our species. And a few even had mysterious metallic residues embedded within the cranial walls, as if they had interfaced with some long-forgotten technology. As these discoveries mounted, a strange pattern of suppression began to emerge. Museums quietly hid them away in back rooms, labeling them as unusual deformities. Private collectors and independent researchers had to fight tooth and nail just to obtain samples for testing, and when those tests were finally conducted, the results created far more questions than answers. They found DNA strands that did not match any known human lineage. They discovered proteins not catalogued in any biological database, and microstructures that looked engineered rather than naturally formed. The controversy reached a breaking point in the early 2000s when leaked documents suggested that certain government agencies had been monitoring these discoveries for years. Skulls were reportedly confiscated under the justification of public heritage protection, but witnesses claimed the real reason was to prevent the public from learning just how different some of these beings truly were. Then came the whistleblowers. Former museum workers described receiving orders to relocate entire collections of skulls overnight to undisclosed facilities, where they vanished without a trace. Researchers who dared to publish unconventional findings found themselves professionally discredited, blacklisted from academic circles, or pressured into retracting their work. Suddenly, excavation permits in key regions became mysteriously difficult to obtain. It was as if some institution, some powerful force, was systematically closing the doors on the past, brick by brick, erasing any evidence that didn't fit the accepted timeline of human history. But you can't bury the truth forever. The skulls themselves kept resurfacing, often discovered completely by accident. A farmer digging a new trench for irrigation. A child exploring a cave. A construction team uncovering a burial mound that had been sealed for millennia. And with each new specimen came new anomalies. Jaw structures that were inconsistent with human musculature. Sinus cavities that were either drastically reduced or entirely absent. and cranial vaults that suggested a brain far larger than ours, perhaps capable of processing information in ways we can only begin to imagine. Now, some of the skulls clearly showed signs of deliberate modification, like head binding, but many others bore no marks at all. Their shapes were too perfect, too uniform, too biologically coherent to be the result of artificial deformation. These were not altered humans. They were beings with their own stable morphology, their own unique biology, their own distinct origin. And if these beings really existed, the question becomes terrifyingly simple. Where did they go, and why did they leave? The legends from ancient Mesoamerican cultures, like the Maya and the Aztec, speak of gods descending from the sky. They tell of great teachers who promised to one day return. They describe beings who walked among humanity until a great catastrophe drove them back to the stars. The elongated skulls align eerily with those legends, as if they are the corporeal remains of the very entities described in ancient codices, entities who may have lived, taught, and ruled long before history as we know it began. But perhaps the most chilling part of this entire mystery is what modern witnesses claim to have seen. Even today, in the rural regions of northern Mexico, people still report encounters with tall, thin figures with elongated silhouettes. They are seen watching from the edge of the desert at dusk. They leave behind circular impressions in the soil that shimmer faintly under ultraviolet light. They are said to emit a low-frequency hum that makes animals panic and causes machinery to malfunction. These sightings are often dismissed, of course, but they persist, forming a consistent pattern that stretches across decades. So what are people seeing? Are these the descendants of the same beings whose skulls we have found? Survivors of a species that once walked openly among ancient civilizations? Or are they something else? Guardians, perhaps, returning to retrieve the remnants of their past, erasing the evidence before humanity can uncover the full extent of their existence on our planet. For every question that gets an answer, 20 more seem to rise in its place. But one truth remains undeniable. The skulls are real, the anomalies are real, and the silence surrounding them is deliberate. It feels like someone, or something, does not want the world to know what these beings were, where they came from, or what it might mean if they ever return. And as more of these skulls continue to emerge from the earth, one overwhelming possibility becomes impossible to ignore. These creatures were not myths, they weren't symbols, and they weren't just legends, they were real. They walked this land long before we did, and it seems that history has spent centuries trying and failing to bury them for good. The story isn't over. In fact, it might just be beginning. Thanks for watching. If you found this mystery as compelling as I do, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the unknown. We'll see you next time.